You are live on the Tuesday Review on 98.9 Northwest FM. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by James. How you going, James? What's something that's made you happy this week?
I could go on a rant, but I don't want to take up too much time from our special guest. So I'll in a couple weeks' time, we will talk more Nora Ephron talk.
Okay,
so that's
good.
just a little.
Exciting, yeah.
It's a little taste for the listeners in a couple weeks.
Also joined by Alan. How you going, Alan? What's something that's made you happy recently?
I'm doing okay. Payday has made me happy this week.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Black Friday sales, so I need that cash.
And we're also joined by Kevin from
UltraPlayers.
How are you, Kevin? Has anything made you happy in this last week?
Hey, no, thanks for having me on. What's made me happy this last week? Probably I'm about to go on vacation, so
Nice.
which is going to be pretty good. So that's always a good thing to be looking forward to.
That's always the best reason to be happy. As for me, what's made me happy this week is they found a lost John Ford film in Chile after like 100 years.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
That's cool. As a movie fan, that's always interesting.
That would be interesting.
We'll see
yeah.
if it's watchable though.
Yeah, if they can release it, it might be a partial. Yeah.
So we are joined by Kevin here from
UltraPlayers,
and we were lucky. I was lucky enough to play his game at PAX Australia in 2024. Hello World. First off, how are you going? How is your PAX recovery?
it's pretty good. I'll just have to correct it quickly because Hollow Games technically is the company based in UK. They're the guys that made No Man's Sky. I was going to quickly say as much as I'd say it'd be really cool working with them. But I understand why, because the game's called Hollow World. We are making that game. The company's called UltraPlayers, which is based over in Box Hill. Post PAX recovery has been pretty good so far. I did get sick afterwards, but I did take that entire week off. Did get sick, unfortunately, but recovered, luckily. And now back into the things, slowly getting ready, obviously, for the next year, as we're looking to do like more play tests for the video game.
Excellent. I'll edit that in. I'll just be like, we're joined by Kevin from, and then Kevin saying, oh.
His AI voice.
Okay.
I wanted to play Hello World at PAX 2023 when we were there, and you guys were so busy that I never got a chance, which I guess is a good sign for you guys. So I mean, how was your PAX experience?
Yeah, it's been different for both years, right? So 2023 was, as far as I remember, actually the first time that PAX actually came back from COVID. So I think the energy that everyone experienced at that time, because no one had had the opportunity of really doing PAX almost for like 3 years in a row. It was like everyone needs to go do everything at that time, and there weren't larger vendors to compete. That's why I felt like 2023 was busier. Not saying this year wasn't busy, it was still flowing. We still had like a lot of good feedback. It was really exciting to still be there. But I felt like it was definitely a bit of a shift in terms of what we felt from last year. I think last year was just everyone was just keen as beans to be back in a conference space. Everyone was actually able to get back together for the first time in ages. Whereas this year it kind of felt like it was a little bit slower, and there was probably less people coming through, as weird as it is to say.
Yeah, we noticed that this year, as opposed to last year, there were like a lot of open spaces that didn't really have any stalls, and apparently that was like a Disney thing that's buying space that
The rumors on the con floor were that Disney had just rented an exorbitant amount of space for Lorcana and then not used half of it.
Yeah, I guess they thought the lines were going to be longer.
Okay.
But that's just rumors and unsubstantiated kind of gossiping. But anyway, it wouldn't surprise me.
I haven't heard anything about like in terms of all the Disney stuff and whatnot. So I mean, it depends where the rumor comes from, right? If it comes from an injury source, it'd be pretty believable. If it's someone that has something against Disney, completely different story there. So,
but definitely, the vibe from 23 to 24 was a bit different. But it seemed like you guys were always a popular attraction, so that's good, I think.
Yeah, I think that also tracks with our experience too, because we had a harder time getting interviews because people were so busy. And that was without all the we had extra help this year with Alan coming to the convention, but still we had a really difficult time trying to fit people in.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you want to just, I guess, for our listeners, just explain the game in a general kind of term?
Yeah, so it's changed a little bit actually from PAX, but overall, it is a mobile game. We're calling it an inventory management RPG at the moment, where ancient creatures have come back to life on a ruined Earth, essentially, and you kind of need to take back Earth. Very, very high level summary. A lot of twists and turns inside the story, but the game itself is just evolving over time, and that's why it's always like changing as we're going, especially in a rapidly developing kind of like market space where everything just seems like within 6 months something new drops.
Yeah.
We have to change and kind of go with it as well.
So I mean, I guess that leads into our next question pretty perfectly. Like in a game with the gameplay loop kind of and gameplay systems, why would you choose mobile versus say another kind of a regular PC or console experience? Is this your like? How are you managing to, I guess, keep a consistent morale? I guess, as you said, everything's changing pretty frequently. How do you manage to kind of keep on top of it all?
Yeah, so a bit of backstory in terms of the developers, right? So I work more on the publishing side, so I help out with some of the developer aspects in terms of localization and whatnot, but a lot of the developers have had that previous experience on releasing mobile titles. So they worked part of the team that made Gumballs and Dungeons, which was like a mobile title that was released in 2016. Also, Super Snail, which is a game that came out in the Western market a bit more recently, but it was available in the Chinese market like back in 2020. And they've had proven success from those like titles already. So their experience has been a lot more grounded inside the mobile market. And obviously the mobile market is absolutely massive in China. And hopefully the PC market's going to catch up pretty soon after the release of Black Myth Wukong. But that's obviously a different story. So kind of that's like a little bit why they're still going for the mobile market a little bit more. And even with all the changes, they've always stuck back to the fundamental root on why we're making video games. And this is like always a core concept we go back to. We're making games because we want to have fun with video games. It isn't about trying to chase, and sometimes it obviously is a complex thing because there are wages that need to be paid and stuff like that. You can appreciate it as a worker in the back of your mind. It is going to be a common worry. But the flexibility of working inside a smaller studio is the fact that, yeah, you have the flexibility of chasing the fact that the game is meant to be fun, right? That's the biggest thing. Like, I know it sounds really weird in all the times of uncertainty. Always remind ourselves, if the game is fun, we don't need to worry about anything else beyond that because we know that people are going to play it because that's the fundamental truth about video games.
100%.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to play it. Nathan, you got a chance to play it.
Yeah, I had a good time.
What's the gameplay like? Kevin, can you explain like the basics, the mechanics?
So, I was going to ask, like, do you want Nathan to kind of explain it a little bit more from like an outside perspective? Because like that probably a bit more interesting in terms of me trying to give like a marketing pitch. Yeah.
When I played it, I was a little cat, and it was something like a cat, and it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic Earth, like it's a ruined Earth.
Yeah.
And then I was just exploring a map, kind of like an Earth map. And then events would happen when I got to a different tile, and it would like, do you want to go into this cave? And I was like, sure, I'll go into the cave. And then there was like treasures and traps and like interesting events that would happen.
Oh, okay.
So for me, I really liked that. It was like almost like just an exploration game. As you said, inventory management. Like I managed to pick up some loot, and I'm like, that might help me later, or like different what I assumed were crafting materials and those kinds of things. So I didn't get to play too much.
Did you get to a combat scenario?
I think I did, but I can't remember. It's been a little while since PAX.
Yeah.
But I did like it. It was kind of like very adventure-y.
Yeah, because like a lot of the items, as Nathan was saying, when you find them, it would just be very much okay. Then you have to organize it inside a limited space. So when you think about when we're talking about inventory management on this side, it's less like the traditional. You find a sword, you equip it in a sword slot, and things like that. It's more of like an RE4 kind of attaché case where you have a finite amount of space. The stronger the item is, normally it takes up more space, but also it can be very oblique. So like a hammer is not shaped like a 4x2 object. Obviously the hammer aspect is going to be larger, So then you have to consider, okay, well, if it's going to be larger, how am I going to fit other items around it, and what kind of thing I'm going to go for? So obviously, it's still very early on in terms of what we're going for, but that's kind of like the overall concept. The items that you find in your exploration, you get to put in your backpack. You have to determine on how it's going to fit inside there. So like Tetris-esque a little bit, RE4, jiggling around that puzzle space, and that affects your combat power afterwards.
And I think there was also an element of like detoxifying the planet or something like that. I was like cleansing an area, or there was kind of stuff like that.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
with like a grid-based kind of map.
Yeah. I always like, because a thing we talk a lot about on the show is world building. So we always love, even if a game doesn't have like a cinematic story in terms of cutscenes and like a lot of exposition, just the world you get to explore and inhabit while you're playing, it hints at a larger story and like a backstory that
there was enough there that I was excited enough to come back later and like, please talk to me. Like, I'm like, I know you're very busy, but please take our card, please. Because there's interesting story mechanics, and I said like events happen, and like it's with mobile games, I have a love and hate relationship, because I'm like, what kind of mobile game is it going to be? Is there going to be a story? Is it going to be, you know, like a Genshin Impact type behemoth where I'm not going to play it on a phone? I know millions of people do. I'm not throwing Genshin Impact any shade, but I'm like, you've got those console-like experiences or the puzzle-like experiences, and where's this game going to fall in between? And it fell in a way where I'm like, oh, there could be some cool story here. There's things to look at with lore and all that kind of stuff. So it's more interesting to me, and it probably won't burn a hole in my pocket with my phone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're definitely hoping as well that the story is going to be the driving factor. Even though, like, story is like one of the hardest ones, right? Because as far as I know, I'm a terrible creative writer, but I always try to follow the principle still of show, don't tell. And that's very hard for a mobile game.
Yeah.
Like, weirdly as it sounds, right? Because a lot of people have probably been fiending for a mobile game that actually has a really detailed story. The truth is like, how do you try to capture someone interest in 5 to 10 minutes and things like that? I felt like we did it decently well last year, because we actually had that introductory sequence that explained the story a little bit better. But because we have such limited playtesting time at PAX this year, we decided to go the other way around. And I did notice a lot of people did miss out on that. The story that we're trying to go for is actually quite complex, and it's probably too complex at times, and trying to explain it doesn't make sense until it's inside the game, because we want to go for that show, not tell kind of thing. So hopefully we're able to turn around that market a little bit in terms of, this is a mobile game that you can get with a deep story that you can actually really enjoy, and actually challenges on how the player's perspective goes and things like that. So
a question on that, from reading I've been doing, are the maps obviously procedurally generated, or because that's what one of the, I think, articles were saying? Is that correct, or has that been changed?
That's correct, yeah. So it's all procedurally generated. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how we're going to make it roguelike as well, because we have a lot of inspirations from like the roguelike titles, but that's only one part of it so far. Obviously, procedurally generated map is one part of the progression of roguelike. How the progression is going to reset or things like that, we're still working out how the best way to proceed is right now. So,
sorry to cut you off there on that topic. Right. When you're doing, I guess, procedurally generation and like other roguelike elements of like resetting, what are the challenges that come into like keeping a flowing story going in that? Because obviously, if you're going back to certain points, you don't want to kind of be repeating the same story aspects. You want to be bringing them in. So, what kind of challenges are you facing, and how are you kind of overcoming them?
I think that's a big thing, right? Like, story is always going to be the largest issue when it comes to, I guess, like a roguelike kind of thing. Not saying roguelikes can't have great stories, but it's much more difficult because you need to try to find something that has replayability. And ultimately, it's the whole gameplay loop of getting further in your run is kind of like the key factor of a lot of roguelikes. I think like the biggest challenge for us has kind of been actually working the roguelike part into it. So because we want to go in that direction, but how we're going to actually achieve it is like a really different story. Are we going to go for something that's going to be, as soon as you open into a new tile set or a map, your progression is going to be reset? You can maybe keep 1 or 2 items. We don't know yet. How is that going to look? Is it going to be that if you die, well, you don't really like that as well, because that means your entire progression is reset. So, but that's the purpose of roguelike, right? Is if you die, then your progression is reset. So we're trying to figure out the right answer at the moment. The truth is we haven't sorted it out just yet in our own heads. And that's the tricky part of it, trying to find a fun gameplay loop while trying to explain a really in-depth story. And we have maybe a potential idea how we want to go for it, but it's not certain just yet, so...
Okay, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how you overcome that. The thing that drew me to your booth at PAX was the art style. As soon as I saw that, I was like, we're talking to them. We're going over there. Can you talk about like who does the art, what the inspiration behind it is, and something like that?
Yeah, so it's an artist that he does a lot of different looks in terms of, okay, like when I'm doing this kind of thing, what am I looking to be inspired by? What style am I going for? That kind of thing. So, and I'd say that probably 25% of it, I've seen it, right? 25 to 30% of it is drawing. 70% of it is actually doing research and referencing what they're going to be drawing and why that style is in particular vogue and whatnot. So obviously enhanced by doing previous works, as I was saying before, with Super Snail as well as Gumball's Dungeons, but also then actually looking at, say for example, an agent design we have is very heavily inspired by like the Power Rangers of old, but there's like a lot of different series from Japan, and even like in the Western market, that do a very similar style of that. So instead of just drawing, like from my recollection, there's a lot of look into it. It's like, what are the poses like? Why are the poses like that? So on and so forth. And I think when you start looking at why certain things are done, and then you start replicating in your own art style, it's like, yeah, it's unique in its own way, but you can see references to it. And we're hoping that people can see it. It's like they can see references to why, like, even with the Hollow World, with the color shading, there's a very clear reason why we went with the red and blue, right? There's a reason why we went with the medical pills. It's like we wanted to go for that kind of like Matrix kind of style of, ignoring the modern day context of it, because that's gone a little bit. We're going like towards more of the ancient context of what kind of reality you want to pick, right? What kind of perspective you want to pick. So a lot of those artistic choices are intentional as a result.
Yeah, it's really striking.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of it is actually research and reference and then being implemented in your own art style. So obviously I'm not the guy that's doing the art, but I've seen how they do the artwork a lot of the time, and it's as a result of that, it's kind of like, yeah, normally you'd expect them to just smash out artwork after artwork day in, day out. But the reality of it is like actually doing a lot of research and going, cool, what am I actually trying to reference? What am I actually trying to portray with this? And what kind of image am I trying to give the player ultimately at the end of the day to kind of, and what I'm going to do to actually get that outcome? Especially
when part of your story and world building is so tied to visuals, you obviously want to have that, strength in the behind the scenes research and all that. Yeah, it was just really striking. I really loved it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I need toys, I need t-shirts, I need key rings. That's the stuff I like. So just if there's any team meetings with you guys, we want the merch.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely like down the pipeline. Once the game's released, we want to release other things around it, but focus right now is on the game.
Yeah, obviously the game. Yeah, we want now. But then afterwards, I want all the cool little trinkets.
Yeah, exactly. And I've already thought about a couple of good meme ideas for shirts. So
nice.
Hopefully, so. Yeah.
All right. I guess so. Obviously, it's a lot further away, but what's the development roadmap looking like? Like do you have another planned sort of public test?
We do have another planned public test. We're hoping to aim for like Q1 for next year at this point in time, and we're hoping like that way people can actually sit down, start from the beginning of the introduction, like go through the story, get onto the map, and then actually start finding, okay, what the gameplay loop is going to feel like a little bit more in depth. And we're going to find with that playtest as well a little bit more of the struggles of, well, our players being entertained, right? Are players actually staying for the 15-minute story and going, yeah, this is good, we're going to stay for a lot longer and things like that? Are they actually going to be entertained by the gameplay loop and things like that? In terms of like the overall roadmap, it's still hard to say. We know what the next 6 months is probably looking like and what we want to add into the game. But in terms of like a firm gameplay release, my answer is still the same as PAX, which is we're not 100% certain just yet. Because even though we have like a roadmap of this is where we want to go in the next 6 to 12 months, a playtest can ultimately give you insight in things that you thought would actually work out don't, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of go back and go, well, okay, now we have to rework that with the feedback we've received. And obviously giving a grain of salt with some of the feedback, because you still have a vision of where you want to go with the game. And some players may not be able to see that vision, and the feedback they'll give is like, well, it's very different from the vision. You want to maintain the vision, but also at the same time, you still want to maintain the entertainment aspect of the video game.
You can't you can't please everybody either. Like some
Exactly, you
people are
can't
just not
please
going to
everyone.
vibe with the product you're making, and you can't do anything about that.
Exactly, but if the vision, they understand the vision, and the gameplay, they're not enjoying the gameplay, I think that's a bit of a different story, right? And that's the part where you got to tweak it a little bit more. Whereas if they go, the gameplay doesn't reflect what they think the game is going to be, but the game is never going to be like that, that's going to be a different story. Whereas if it's, oh, we're playing this part, but there's like a gameplay loop that doesn't feel fun, and I don't really want to come back to it, and it's actually a core fundamental part of why our game works, that's a completely different story then. That means that we need to actually go back and rework that to be a lot better, so that way we know that the players will enjoy it a lot more, and we know that the system is going to be a lot more tighter. So,
how long has it been in development for?
It's been in development for just under 1.5 years now. So,
okay.
So the progress has been a lot slower this time around, because once again, when you're coming to the refinement of the systems, that's the difficult part, because you have to then go back and go, okay, this is what we need to tweak. And a lot of the internal testing that we do as well, we're fully aware of, oftentimes, I'd like to think that we're fully aware of the weaknesses and whatnot. And it's like feedback that we do every single time when we're going through a build. We're going, this part's weak, this part is bad compared to that, we should tweak it like this way, so on and so forth.
Were there any like big features that were awesome, but you were just like, yeah, this is not working, and you had to cut them out?
Probably like the biggest one in the current iteration right now is like items. We wanted items to actually change in terms of, so looking at the PAX build, right? We're looking to include it in the future, but right now it's like items in the backpack can change shape and I think form, or like utility wise, if the pilot is actually mentally disturbed. So because he might have a cognitive dissonance where it's like all of a sudden he might recognize a boomerang, or she might recognize a boomerang as a bird or something completely different. But it's like it's a concept which I don't think any, like, correct me if I'm wrong, any game is actually approached, right? Like, you put an item into your backpack and it's changed in terms of shape, and we're going, okay, well, is it changing functionality? How are we portraying the fact that it's actually changing into a completely different object, right? And these other things, and then challenging the player to play around that. So that's still like such a large, because it's such a game changer, that's still like a concept that we're trying to figure out how to exactly do. So we couldn't really fit it inside the PAX build. It's something that we want to get into the end build of the game. But it's one of those hard things to get done right, because it's just hard to tweak.
I'm just thinking of it as a player perspective. An item changes in my inventory. I'm like, is that a glitch? Like, that's my first instinct. I'm like, did something go wrong in the game? Whereas it needs to be, subtly explained that, hey, something's going on with your character, and therefore the items change, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
And having that portrayed to most players in a clear way, while also not just being ham-fisted and being like, hey, this happened because of this. Like you said, you want to show, not tell.
If you can pull that off, it'd be really, really interesting, because when you're playing a game like Amnesia, and like the gameplay changes if your character's afraid. So it's like, that would be really interesting if you're like, okay, I can't I can try to brute force this, but if I do, my character might be mentally attacked, and then therefore the things in my inventory might not be as useful as they are.
Well, they might be more useful.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So
that'll be really interesting to see that implemented. Yeah. Can you tell us more about how the world, because I guess if it ties into the world, because it's like a dystopian post-apocalyptic future, right?
probably a little bit more post-apocalyptic, but there's probably some dystopian elements to it. Once again, like with how we're trying to do the storyline, but that's like a little bit more further down. I don't have anything to kind of like show in that game right now.
Yeah.
What are your big inspirations for the game's story? Is there anything you looked at and said that's really cool, I want to do something similar, or is it kind of where has the creative team drawn just just inspirations for the narrative?
I think like the core inspirations come back down to a lot of for the creator mainly, for like the creative producer. I don't know if you ever seen any like Stephen Chow movies like Kung Fu Hustle, Shaolin Soccer, like that kind of nonsense slapstick comedy. There's a lot of that, essentially, like non sequitur kind of humor and things like that, trying to throw the player off balance a lot of the time, or the person off balance. That's been like a lot of the big drawing of in terms of their inspiration, and I think also coupled in the fact of understanding like different people's perspectives as well. So he wanted to make a game that kind of challenged that perspective of, well, this person has lived through this life and they had this perspective. Does it mean that their perspective is any more better or worse than this other person's perspective? And people will look at things in different ways. So honestly, he's like a really, really interesting dude, because like sometimes like there's like things. Easiest way for me to explain this perspective thing, right? I was recording content with him for something. And when you meet a dignitary or like a head of the state, like what would you dress up as, right? What's tradition telling you to dress up as?
Or, I mean, in a suit, nice formal wear, respectful kind of official clothing.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because like you want to look respectful and things like that and whatnot. God bless the creative producer, right? Lovely guy, like I said. He said to me, everyone's going to be doing that, right? I'm not saying it like, and if you wear something different, you rock up to it. I'm not saying anything that's disrespectful. I'm not obviously behaving in a disrespectful manner. Actually, in that regard, wouldn't they be more likely to remember you because you're someone that stands out in comparison to everyone else? That's not, like, that was like I was like, you're right. In terms of your perspective, you're correct, because obviously the social norm is that when you're going to a lot of these things, and like say if I'm going to my brother's wedding, I'm still not going to rock up in trackies for everyone to remember me. Don't get me wrong. But that kind of thought pattern, that kind of like that creative thought pattern in terms of how he looks at things, that's kind of like the unique aspect he's bringing into the game. So, and that got me thinking a lot more. I was like, yeah, okay, that explains so much more about. It explains a little bit more about why our game is the way it is, and also how he views the world a little bit. But it also was challenging in regard of, like you're correct. That's not an incorrect perspective, right? Like it's definitely not an incorrect perspective. So,
yeah, that's who you want behind your creative side of the team, I guess. Someone who's going to think outside the box.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a strength. As James just said, someone who's, a creative person working on this product definitely needs to have a bit of that almost kind of, Hideo Kojima energy, where it's just like a little bit weird, a little bit kind of doesn't really care what the norm or the conventions are. Let's do something different. A little bit brave.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So...
Yeah, because otherwise you don't stand out and you just make a cookie cutter game that anyone can make. But I think, like you were talking about the humor, and Nathan was saying you played as a cat.
I think it was a
It
cat.
was a little cat person.
Yeah, there's a little cat that follows you around.
Yeah.
But the story
okay.
that we're trying to go right now is like, well, is it actually the cat that's controlling everything? You controlling stuff. So one of the things inside the game is that the cat actually has like an elevated ID status. So, and you can actually see it subtly inside like the demo. So if anyone does try it out, you can subtly see it. It's like in the player. So when you get the ID cards of a normal agent, it's just like a very normal plain one. But when you get the one from the cat, it's actually a golden framed one. It's actually elevated in status.
Cats
so
are
it's like
gonna approve.
so it's like it's separated a little bit. That if you dive down deep enough, you actually see that no, the cat's actually got special status. So that's the kind of thing where we
As
go
they
like,
do.
is it?
Yeah,
as
well,
they
You
do.
have a white cat, don't you? Is that your profile picture? There's a white
Yes,
cat.
no, I did used to own a white cat. That was before. Unfortunately, it was like in my previous relationship.
Okay,
But no, that was we adopted the cat together and stuff like that.
Yes. I also
Yeah.
have a white cat. I'm just saying, white cat represent.
I swear to goodness, those white cats. I'm like, they're smart. If we just stereotype it, they're smart, but they're dumb in so many different ways. But when it
Yeah.
comes to one particular thing,
Yeah.
and for my white cat, it was food.
Okay.
He was just so intelligent about how to get to food. He understood where food was. He did everything he could get to food. Everything else, he was just so dumb about. I feel like it's just like white cat energy.
Rosie
Like-
doesn't care about food. Our cat doesn't care about food, but she plays soccer. We have these tiny little mini footballs.
Right. Yep.
And she like kicks them around, does flips, does everything with the soccer
Except
balls.
when I'm there.
Except when we get
Meanwhile,
visitors,
she'll run
and
into
she's
the
like,
door.
"No, I'm not playing for these people. I'm not here to impress you." Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So cats are a big part of the game too. Obviously. Extra stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, cats are still an inspiration. I mean, creative producer owns like a couple of cats. I mean, in terms of for the publishing, like my boss of UltraPlayers, so like looking at the publishing side of things, she has a cat as well. So British Shorthair, which is
Nice.
like a big inspiration. So a lot of the times when people will see stories that will come out from us, it's not the case of us making up something. It's actually something that's happened in real life. And this cat's done something, and we've gone, you know what? Let's put that inside the game, kind of thing. So, very much the case of that. So,
Excellent. Anyone else have any other questions for Kevin?
I'm sure I had one. Hang on.
I'll chime in while
Yeah.
you're thinking of it, James.
Yeah.
I'm still kicking myself that I didn't, get a chance to play the game.
Yeah.
Again, doing some background reading. Is the Guyver system still a part of the game?
the
Well, I know
guidance
you-
system, yeah, it is.
So could you give a little bit of an explainer on that?
Yeah, this is like one of the parts where we realize it's like, even though it's one of the cooler parts of it, it's really hard to explain. So obviously the word Guyver comes from, and anyone searching this up probably realize it comes from a very older Japanese series, and that's kind of the inspiration, right? Where it's like a human integrated with like one of these like biomechanical suits and essentially gain those powers. Our kind of twist to it is that instead of humans integrating with like this biomechanical suit of like an alien, it's actually a biomechanical suit of an organic being. So it can be like a plant, it can be a dinosaur or like an ancient creature, it can be an alien, but that's the concept. You gain some of those powers, you become stronger, and you gain a little bit of those abilities to be able to kind of like at least roam the earth, fight back a little bit. Because obviously us humans were kind of like puny and weak. Imagine if you fuse together with like a T-Rex is always the easy example. Suddenly, well, it doesn't seem as scary. If, say, for example, your boss tells you something and you don't like it, so you just eat him instead because you're a T-Rex. Not saying I would ever do that with my boss if she ever comes back and watches this this interview.
I'm pretty sure I got the T-Rex card. Was there a T-Rex card at PAX?
There was a T-Rex card, that's
Yeah,
correct.
Oh,
yeah.
I saw the
I got-
cards. I didn't get one. They were so cool.
I'm pretty
See, this is
sure
what
I
I'm
got
talking
the
about.
T-Rex
Merch.
I was having a look at some of the art, and I saw the Guyver system, and for some reason the memory that it sparked for me, even though I was too old to be watching this, was the Digimon Fusion series, where
Right, yep.
the characters would actually fuse with their own Digimon, which again, ridiculous when you think about it, but at the same time it's really cool. It's just being like, all right, like I'm base human, but you know what? I want some extra power. Let's do some fusion. and let's see where it takes us. Somewhere wild and wacky, but also it's just a really cool concept.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what we wanted to go for. I think the pros of it obviously is the art style. When you see these integrations, these Guyvers, they stand out so much. But I think the downside is very much the recognizable term, right? If you come across it, the first question a lot of the time people are going to go, it's like, oh, what is a Guyver? And it's like that's the realization of one of the struggles we had at PAX, and this is what we're talking about, learning processes when we're working inside the gaming industry, is okay. We wanted to portray something really, really cool, but the problem is that the Guyver term isn't something as easily identifiable. How can we kind of simplify that a little bit more? Maybe we're going to do this, do that. That's the kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I love Guyver, the old, like, there was a 90s, like, OVA anime, and there was 2, like, live action movies that, I have a soft spot for. But yeah, it's not like the term mech or Gundam, where it would probably be more, or Power Rangers, like it's more widely known.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if you say Guyver, if you say Guyver, you kind of have to have a little.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, you have to have a little explainer, I guess.
Like, did someone say MacGyver? What?
Yeah, MacGyver.
Listen, am I getting out the room with a string and a button?
Yeah. Well, that's where the inventory management comes in. It's like, oh, this has
exactly.
To be, I had a question. I can't find it. I had it written down.
Oh no.
Damn my awful memory.
That's it. Fog brain.
Fog brain. Yeah, I never got COVID, but I got the fog brain. I don't know how that works.
All right. No, that's all right. What's the question? Well, I reckon we'll say something. It'll be completely unrunrelated. The question will come back.
Yeah,
so.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll go to bed tonight and I'll be like, Kevin, like when Home Alone, when she's on the mum's on the plane.
The plane. Oh, jeez.
That's all right. You'll remember it. We might even be lucky enough to get Kevin back before his next public play test, and we can promote it.
Oh, hopefully I'll get to play it. And
remember
we can...
some questions.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, potentially so.
Where can people find you right now?
So they can find us on 4 social media platforms. So on Facebook, we're just Hello World. Oh, sorry, we're Hello World Game. A Hello World Game. Because Hello World is a very popular kind of title. So when people kind of search for it, it's like a lot of the time won't come up. So a Hello World Game.
I think if you put Hello World UltraPlayers, that'll probably come up.
Yeah, they'll come up with most of our...
World.
I think that's where I got confused. When I saw Hello World Game, I'm like,
Hello World Game.
So I just assumed,
Hello Games, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously we got Hello World Travel, all this other stuff. But yeah, if you type in Hello World UltraPlayers, you'll most likely see our Facebook page. In terms of we also are starting up a TikTok, as well as a Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days, because I still call it Twitter. And I think it's like play_Hello World on both of them. Or play Hello World, or like some iteration of either of those, because just the random tags are taken at that time. And yeah, we're also on Discord as well, and the link to Discord obviously is a bit harder to read out, so it's a bit easier to jump on our Facebook.
Put it all
and
in the description.
Yeah, we'll
in the
link
episode.
on the description.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, so I'll make sure to flick over those links across afterwards. So I should have just said, just look in the description below.
Yeah, that's it.
That would have been easier.
We always make it harder than it has to be. All right.
Yeah.
We are a movie show, Kevin. Don't feel like you have to answer this question. We can always cut it out if you're not a movie guy. But do you have a favorite movie? Gut feeling.
I do have like a couple of. I'm not like a huge movie person. So actually, my housemates who are studying media at the moment, they're like much more into movies and whatnot. So probably like if you ask me, my favorite movie of all time in terms of just none serious and just having a good time, it's Penguins of Madagascar. I know. Don't judge me, guys.
It's probably not the worst choice we ever heard on the show. That's why.
It's definitely silly enough. I don't spend enough time watching movies, which is like one of my biggest shames. I think like one of the recent ones I enjoyed was The Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind.
That's a great movie.
So that one, I was like, you know what, I really, really enjoyed that one. So when it does come to movies with like really, really good depth and whatnot, I will sit down and watch it. Yeah, like, but in terms of like best movie I would rate, it's like people are gonna hate me. So it's I say Beggars of Madagascar.
That's it.
Because I go, it's silly fun for me, and I go,
Yeah.
and I think that's what it did perfectly, right? Like, I think it stopped the annoying parts of Madagascar for me, because I'm like, I swear to God, if I hit King Julian one more time, I'm going to throttle the dude, right? So it's like, it's got
It's
the best
like-
parts of Madagascar.
They're
humor.
they're kind of like the original Minions, except not annoying. Like the penguins were the best part of Madagascar, so they made penguins, and then the Minions were everyone's favorite part, or the most popular part of Despicable Me, so they made Minions. But it's like Minions
Yeah.
suck. The penguins are awesome. Just
Yeah,
smile
exactly,
and wait,
yeah.
boys.
Completely
Smile and
valid
wait.
take, Kevin. We'll add it to the list. Very good.
Yeah.
What about video game?
Video games, so interestingly enough, if you ask me, like, because I played like a lot of like shooters and whatnot when growing up, but in my opinion, like, they're not really like the best video games ever. I think like one of the best storytelling video games, if we're looking at a AAA title, would be like Witcher 3 to me.
Yeah.
Just because of like the store, like the world building and stuff like that. Recently, a
too
game that I
intimidating.
mean,
I find that game way too
Yeah, both Nathan and I were playing it, and we're just like, this is too big. There's too much
but
stuff.
because for me that made sense as a game, because I went, even if you didn't know anything about the game and you engage with it, you would go and read a piece of lore. You would learn then how to beat that monster. That made a ton of sense, right? Like, the more you learned about the world, the more you knew how it operated, then the more you'd be able to actually do things and stuff like that. You didn't have to come in with any pre-existing knowledge, and I felt like that was fantastic, and the gameplay and whatnot. But in terms of like something that attracted me pretty recently, so if you ask me like out of this entire year, like the game that I had most fun playing, it would 100% be Mouthwashing, because obviously that only came out 2 months ago.
I've heard that's really good, but I haven't played it. Everyone's going nuts for it.
And it deservedly so. I think it's going to be one of those games, and those indie games, and those video games that will shape, like, I think as more people play it, they realize like how horrific it is as a title, because it's psychological horror / thriller. But I think the horror comes from when you realize, like, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone out there, but I think it just deals with not only societal tones, it deals with like personal tones, it deals with like so many things in current day society right now that's reflected in so many different ways, and it's fascinating to see how people interpret it in different parts. And that's like the horrific part of the game for me, because I go, it is a 2 to 3 hour video game, but the fact that you were able to tell such a great story from it in non-cliche ways as an indie company, just, it's mind-boggling. Like, to me, it's mind-boggling, and that's why I recommend it to everyone. To
That's
at
what's
least
that's
have a
what's so
go.
interesting about video games as like an interactive storytelling device. I guess it's different from movies, different from books. It's like its own special, especially with those kinds of games where it's got that PS1. That kind of it's very popular with indie horror games. That kind of old school retro graphics. There's just something about it that, it's got this certain feeling to it. I don't know how to explain
Well,
it.
for us, it's nostalgia because we grew up.
Yeah,
in that era.
yeah, but it's big with like the younger kids, like Gen Z kids and stuff as well. So I don't know, just there's something about it that
almost like
resonates.
A kind of feeling.
yeah, it's got this weird I guess
I think it's like some. I'd say it's like some kind of cognitive dissonance, right? Because as video games have gotten like more beautiful and things like that, so I think the expectation of horror was it be the visceral kind of horror, right? It's like, oh my god, like that actually looks so lifelike and things. But when you start degrading the graphics, it's like, okay, this thing, not gonna lie, like looking at certain things inside that game wasn't horrific. And I think as a result, it's the tones of the game that you have to explain make it a lot more horrific. And I think that's why people are starting to enjoy it a lot more. When it's starting to devolve back to you can no longer make something horrific in terms of graphic-wise, you have to make the actual theme or the topic horrific. Right?
I've also, something we talk about on the show before is like how games have gotten so realistic graphically now that and they've become so cinematic that it's like, well, you should just make a movie at that point.
And also it takes people like 8 to 10 years and $400 million to make a game.
Yeah, but also like I miss the days when, you know, like just stylized graphics, like cartoony graphic. You know, it's why we were drawn to Hello World. It's like not every game has to be realistic or, you know, have the best graphics. You can you can stylize something in a way.
And this is also across all different kind of areas of entertainment, right? It happens with movies, it happens with TV and video games. It's like at a certain point when the big AAA titles become franchises and they just become like products and content and tick all the boxes for the publishers and they know what makes the most money, they lose a bit of heart. So these indie games come across and they're a little bit more authentic.
That's what we loved about going to PAX and seeing games like Hello World. Is like, this is what we're here for. Yeah. Like we were talking this year after PAX about how Xbox and Sony like weren't there, and I was just like, but I wouldn't care if they were there because they've got the biggest marketing budgets, they've got the biggest
in some ways
game
the least
budgets,
interesting products.
Yeah,
so they're not all. I think the problem with AAA right now, for the most part, is they're not that innovative anymore.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Call of Duty isn't particularly different year to year. FIFA's the same for the last 20 years. And like all of these giant franchises, they don't particularly innovate that much anymore. Like, back in the day, it used to be a big deal. You used to get new kinds of exciting things coming out. And now we're kind of... I guess they're harder to make, right? At a certain level now. Everything's like they're trying to push boundaries. And we're hitting a ceiling.
But that's the thing is those games keep trying to push more money and better graphics. And it's just like, no, what's really interesting is just being creative and being creative with the gameplay and the art style and whatever. Which is why the indie scene is much more... And because the technology now is like one person can make a game on their
what draws us to games
computer.
Like Hello World and the indie games.
Especially now in Australia, we've got a big...
Melbourne's a big city.
Yeah. Have you noticed that, Kevin? Like, the explosion of like the Aussie indie game industry?
I think definitely noticing it from a lot of the conventions that we go to in terms of like developer kind of conventions. I have noticed a lot more, and I think like with the Australian indie scene, it's highly fascinating because there's so much good talent and creative ideas, and I think like that's one of Australia's biggest strengths. Like when you're looking at a lot of like when you're looking at game development and like indie scenes, Australian developers I feel like are some of the most creative developers. In terms of like looking at how they want to make a game. It is very much a pure form of artistic expression on what they want to achieve. The only downside sometimes is scope, because I have to look as a publisher. It's like I have to look at reality of the situation at times and going, I understand that you want to release this kind of game, I'm not going to mention any particular titles over here. But oftentimes, if I hear there's an indie company, as an example, that's releasing an MMO, I'm like, I'm probably not going to expect that to come out. I'm sorry to say. Because the reality of making an MMO with a large scope and a lot of players that want to play it and things like that is that you need a larger team. And that's why I think all the indie games that are succeeding right now, when you look from the Australian perspective, is like a creative twist with like a much smaller level of scope, but like a detail to that scope which makes sense, right? Unpacking, everyone's going to talk about unpacking Untitled Goose Game, because those are games that had like very firm, like Unpacking was from Brisbane, I think, and then Untitled Goose Game was either Melbourne or Adelaide.
I think Melbourne,
Melbourne, yeah. So. And you look at Cult of the Lamb, which is obviously massive monster, Melbourne studio, but they're games that initially started off as obviously there's a very fine scope in what they wanted to do with it, and as a result, they were able to make a game around it. So even though it was creative, ambitious in creativity, it wasn't ambitious in terms of like size-wise. So that's what I like about like a lot of indie devs in Australia. It's just the creativity. Like so many good ideas. I'm like, I wish I could support them all. But the reality is, there's so many games coming out now. It's so difficult to set yourselves aside in a market.
That's the thing. Yeah, we're jealous on the show as well. Like anyone creative or in the creative industry, we're just like, oh damn, those people are so talented. We suck. All we do is like complain about their games and then the movies. It's an interesting time. We've talked a lot about Aussie indie movies as well, and so that seems to be making a comeback as well because, you know,
again, we can also contrast that too. It's like what you need to make a game and what you need to make a movie in today's environment is just talent and hard work and opportunity. And like you can make a movie with an iPhone, you know, you can make a game these days with a laptop. Yeah. Like there's, I guess, and you can teach yourself these skills. Like, you know, it's not like it maybe
the democratization of the sort of technology, and the how far technology has come is a big thing, but it's still hard to
of course
create the thing and then get
100%. There are opportunities available now that maybe 10 years ago people wouldn't have had access.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. Like you look at like in terms of, because once again my housemates they're studying inside media at the moment. For their end of year project, they both shot like an own little short film kind of thing. So scripted it out, acted out, wrote it out, and I had to help with like audio and stuff like that. Even though I have like no training in audio, I have like semi-training in audio, as like more from learnt experience versus like actually book experience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And what I did find is that, okay, now you can actually record like decent 4K or all this quality stuff, and you don't need to spend like an absolute fortune on equipment. Yes, I know Blackmagic is expensive, but considering the cost of like what you're actually getting kit-wise, and then maybe pairing up like a lavalier mic or like a Rode microphone, you can probably get all of that. I'm being very generous, under 5,000. Yeah. It's probably not going to cost up to 5,000.
No, even as you mentioned, Blackmagic, DaVinci Resolve hasn't always been free. You know what I mean? You got world-class software at your fingertips too.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So like the cost of entry has come a lot lower, and as a result, as that cost of barriers become lower, then it means that more people can access it, and creativity comes from all aspects in life. Like everyone comes from a different walk of life. Everyone has a different expression of what they may want to portray, and they may not have the technical like prowess in terms of the camera shot is like perfect and stuff like that. But sometimes like you don't watch a movie in terms of like, oh yeah, the camera angles are really good. It's the story that's like actually phenomenal, and as a result, it's like you don't need to have a cinematic masterpiece in terms of to create a movie. You can have a story masterpiece, and that can sometimes be an amazing story. Like people go like, yeah, cinematography was absolutely jarring, but the story itself was absolutely fantastic, and I'd still go back and watch 100%. It. So
when we talk about movies, ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to how did it make us feel. And exactly. It doesn't have to be a technical masterpiece if it makes you feel something, especially if that message, you know, if that message is what they want you to sort of receive.
But it's also, we find it more interesting, like we were saying, like the indie games are more interesting than the AAA games. One of the reasons is if you have the resources of a AAA company and you're making this huge, bloated $400 million game, it's less impressive than if there's a small team kind of finding creative ways to overcome, you know, their technical and budget limitations. That's way more interesting than the giant team who can do pretty much whatever they want. Because it's like, oh yeah, of course you can. You got $1 bajillion. But yeah, if you're a small team, you'll be like, oh, it's interesting how they did that, and they they had to cut corners here, but it meant they had to do this. Yeah, it leads to a lot more interesting just creativity.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
100%. I agree on that.
We're just about out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kevin,
yeah.
for joining us. It goes quick, huh?
It does. It definitely does. So that's why I always enjoy these chats, especially when... Because, like, even though, once again, I'm not, like, a huge movie person, I do enjoy the artistic aspect of when someone's trying to do something with it. So it's like, it may not be a great movie in terms of, like, a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but what has it actually gone out to accomplish? That's kind of what I look at a lot of the time. I don't think there's ever such thing as a perfect 10 out of 10 game, nor is there a 10 out of 10 movie, because there is always parts that are going to be lacking. But what part of it did it try to portray as a 10 out of 10? And did it achieve that 10 out of 10 in that regard, kind of thing, is what I look at. So,
100%.
But no, it was hella fun. Like, it was really, really fun being on here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to have you back in the future when there's, I guess, more news or more opportunities for people to get their hands on your game.
Yeah.
100% hoping so as well. So, yeah.
You're just about out of time for tonight, everyone. You can catch a Tuesday review on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Newsmast, Blue Sky, Twitter, and YouTube at Tuesday Review AU. We're on Letterboxd as well. I'm Nathan B_90.
I'm channeldrifter.
Callum is Callum Tuesday, but he's not here tonight.
I'm Alum20.
And
Also, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, because it helps us grow and more people to find us.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And make sure to follow Hello World Games. We'll have all the
We'll post about all the links.
all the links in the description. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week. Adios, cousins.